Hey guys, Happy New Year. It's been a little while since we've been in the workshop, in the garage. And as you can see behind me, we've got the side-by-side pulled in. Last weekend, I was doing some tree clearing out in the property and happened to exacerbate one of the patches that I put on the tire. It's actually been patched a couple times, and it's just in a real awkward position. It's up on the sidewall. So probably something I shouldn't have patched in the first place, but you know, it's cheaper to spend a couple bucks on a patch kit than it is to buy a new tire. Nevertheless, here I am. I brought it in another time, and it's never at a convenient time. It's always when it's cold, rainy, or whatever. But today it happens to be cold, so I'm in the garage, got my duds on, and we're going to be taking this tire off. I'm going to show you some of the tricks I use to get new tires sit back on, because that's what I ended up doing. I'm not going to do a patch on this one again. We just have a new tire that we're going to be replacing it. So you can see this guy's pretty flat. It's been sitting out in the backyard a little bit. So I brought it in so it was out of the snow. And we'll get this replaced and you guys can see how I go about doing something like this. Now, some of you guys may remember we have a video out there where we swapped these tires out from the original stock ones that came with this side-by-side. This is a Yamaha Viking. And what I've got are the aftermarket set of tires that came with it. I can't say I'm a huge fan of these. They look a little bit gaudy for me, but I do like the overall extra traction, the deeper tread and stuff that was on there. So I kept these, got rid of the stock ones. But these are a 28-inch tire, 12 inches wide, and that's a 14-inch rim. So what I got is I've got a replacement over here, new tire, came in the mail the other day. And we'll be putting that on. One of the things that I've experienced with other tires, like motorcycles and things, sometimes they'll fold these tires over, maybe tractor tires, they'll fold them over for easier shipping. And that makes it a real pain to sit the tire onto the rim, just because you've got a crease that you have to overcome. In my case, though, we got lucky. This one just came as is. So I'm hoping this should go pretty quick and easy. So the first step of this process is actually to get this to get this bead down off of the rim. And the reason you do that is that if you can picture the side walls of this wheel are concave, so you've got a shape like this. The rubber is not going to stretch, but what you got to do is you got to get the rubber bead down into that inner portion of the concave shape so that you have enough extra room you can bring it up and over the edge. It's cold out, like I mentioned, so this is some pretty stiff rubber, but usually if you kind of just walk around it, you can walk it off kind of slowly to the point where it's down off the metal, and then you can get your pry bars underneath there. Now, I know this is going to be a pretty dirty replacement, and the reason being is that, like I said, I've patched it a couple times. I've used Slurm. Because I go through the woods a lot, I'm getting a lot of stick punctures and things like that. You know, I drive kind of a rough terrain around here. Not rocks and things, just, you know, brush and sticks and whatnot. So there is a lot of Slurm in here, I know, because I pumped a ton of it in there out of a little bit of a frustration with the last patch. So we'll have to get that kind of cleaned off as we're doing this. But for now, we've got this tire off of the rim on the top. Now that it has some flexibility, I can push down. Usually I'll just kneel on it for these smaller tires, and then you can work it up and over on the opposite side. Now, if this was like a car, you probably wouldn't do it this way. You'd use an actual machine, because this has a potential for kind of gumming up your rims. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of these anyways, and it's kind of just a work tool for me as it is, so I'm not looking for it to stay a showboat or anything. And I don't mind if it gets a little scuffed up, but you just kind of work it in, work your way around. You'll get to this point where you've got the most resistance. Once you get past that, then it comes off pretty easy. Let me grab a rag here. So and all we're doing is we're just working it off all the way around. This thing is so slippery with this slurm on here. Let's see if I can keep as much of that in the tire and not on me. So we've got that off the one side. I'm just going to flip it over. I'm going to kind of walk it off this side as well. In the end, I'll be pulling it all up the front side of the wheel, but I got to get it off of this rear seating. There you go. So it's up and off of that. I'll flip it back around. You can see how nasty that is. Even let that drip for a little while so it cleans itself in there. All right, we've let this tire drain a little while into the wheel. It's pretty goopy with that slurm. And now the challenge is getting this wheel out of this front bead. I mentioned this before, but you've got kind of a concave shape to the wheel, and there's these recesses where the diameter is small. You can kind of wiggle the tire rim or tire bead around to those areas, and when you do that, it exposes the wheel through the rubber on the other side, just because you kind of shifted the center axis of both of them. So what I'm going to do is, with it kind of pulled all the way that way, we're just going to kind of work our way around and pry this guy out. It's not a real graceful thing, especially without like a tire machine, but it works. And like I mentioned before, you don't probably want to do this on a nice wheel, like a real nice wheel, because you're likely to scuff things up as you're kind of working your way around and now prying against the face of the wheel. I put it down like this so I can get a knee on it. There we go. Try to keep as much of that junk in there as I can. We'll get this wheel cleaned up now before we move on to the new tire. So for you that are interested out there, this is where the hole had been. It's right between these treads on the sidewall. And it doesn't look like much, but when it was full of air, you'd actually get this big bulge on the side of the tire here. And that's because whatever stick or whatever had kind of punctured through had actually torn kind of the inner lining. So it was only some thin rubber on the sidewall that was holding anything in. So on the inside of the tire, the patches that I had to do, because I had torn that liner, extended, I don't know, 3 or 4 inches all the way around. It looks terrible. It's dumb, I know, but it's kind of one of those things where you're caught up in the heat of the moment and you just want to get back to work. So you throw a couple patches on it versus waiting for a tire. However, this is also an example of one of those cases where it's one of those cry once or buy once, cry once kind of things. Here I am pulling it off a second time. If I had been patient, I probably could have kept found something else to do and just waited for the new tire to show up. Anyways, this is so you guys can learn from my mistakes, right? Okay, with the rim all cleaned up, we can go and get it set into this new tire. If you had a preference for which direction, which side out you wanted, make sure that you're kind of keeping that in mind as you're setting things back together. These tires are they're the same on either side. It's symmetric or identical. So we'll end up just putting it in this way, I guess. And what I'm going to do is essentially we're just working in the opposite direction that we got everything seated on. I'm going to work with this front side first, this face of the wheel, and we're going to put it into that same cavity. This being new rubber might be a little bit more challenging, but we'll see. There's still a little bit of that slurm residue on the wheel, so it's a little bit slicker than it might be if this was, like middle of summer or something and everything's dried out. We don't want to tear the rubber, but you can kind of gauge it as you're working it down. It'll go in after it gets past the little point of resistance here. I'll use a screwdriver since it's a little narrower. I can slide it under here a little easier. Not many instances where I need a screwdriver this big, but when I have, it's always been for tire work. And generally speaking too, the slurm, I kind of am a fan of that. I've used it on tractor tires to pretty good success. It's just because the location of where this hole was on that other tire was so high up, the slurm never really sat on it like it would if you had gotten a hole right kind of in your main tread portion. Like I said, opposite of what we had done before, we've got this now set in at least that far. Now we're going to pull it up and over onto this side. We've got to use that same divot in the wheel, that same smaller diameter area to try to kind of get it into a location where it can have the most flexibility. But again, we're just going to pry things up and over like we had done before. Although this one's going pretty well, tires are never that easy to do if you don't have a real machine to do it. So don't expect it to go perfect the first time. So I guess what I'm saying it. So I got this one side over, at least over the lip. We're just going to keep on kind of prying it around as we go. It can be a little bit of a pain though. You can see I'm kind of kneeling on it to keep the rubber down under the main lip. And try not to take too aggressive of a pull as I'm doing it so that I can kind of ease it over. Shoot. Everything's slippery. So after working on this for a little while, I realized that I just wasn't heavy enough to get the tire to collapse in a way that it would get down into that recessed portion of the wheel like I had mentioned earlier. One of the tricks that I've used on other vehicles, particularly the tractor where I've got the front loader and tines, is that you can use that machine to help compress the rubber for you. In the case of the tractor, I'll put the tines of the forks, of pallet forks on either side of the wheel, and then just use the front loader to compress the tire down around the wheel. In this case, as you can see, I'm using the weight of the side-by-side to press the rubber down into that lower cavity so that I can kind of work it around a little bit better. This by far is the most aggravating portion of the tire repair that I think. And that's maybe exacerbated by the fact that it's just cold out and this rubber is pretty stiff. It's not very malleable at this point. But this trick seems to work. Like I mentioned, you can use it to push things down, and before you know it, you'll get it on there. I apologize if the air compressor goes off in the background. We got this tire on here. It's loosely on the rim. It always is helpful to kind of walk the tire around a little bit. Try to get it to get itself onto the rim. Sometimes you can kind of do what you did before, except now be walking on the metal instead. Get it to kind of push itself into place. If you needed to, you could use soap. That sometimes helps get things set on there, around the rim. I've got so much slurm on there, I'm not going to worry about the soap. I'm not getting it to hold air yet. So what are we going to do? Well, you just got to find the few spots where that rim isn't quite pushed on there and hopefully get it to the point where you can just get it to hold just enough air to start changing its shape. It's like right around here for me, which I guess makes sense because that's where the tire's most depressed on there. What we'll do is see if we can work it back out that way. Okay, well, let's try, another method that I've used in the past is a ratchet strap method, kind of a belly band approach. I don't know, maybe you guys can come up with a better name for it than that. But essentially what we're going to do is try to put some pressure on the outside of it, holding it like this so that we balloon out this way. It kind of flares out just enough so that you can get the air to start holding on there. With your ratchet, you want to keep the flat of the ratchet, where the actual ratchet portion is, probably away from the your location of interest where you're trying to get the air to pinch. I don't think it has to be very tight to do this. Obviously, if it does start holding air, you'll want to get that off so that you can just let it expand. But it's coming in right around here. Maybe a bit more. See if that's enough to do it. Sorry about that, guys. My air compressor started going off and it was just getting a little too noisy. I ended up letting the air off of the tire and actually worked the bead back down a little bit. What I was having a problem is I know I had mentioned I had some of that slurm on here, but there was one sticky spot where I just couldn't get the tire to seat fully onto the rim. So I've taken it off, a little bit of dish soap just around the perimeter, kind of working it under this metal so that the rubber can slide up on there nice. And you guys can kind of see how it'll pop up once it gets enough pressure in it. Hopefully. Yeah, there you go. Hope to see if I got enough on there though for it to pop this last bit. Hopefully not overdo it. Nope. You have to try that one again. Well, we're not even at 15 psi. These can go up to 36 before I got to start worrying about them. So just keep going on it. There we go. Where are we at now? It's 20. So I'm going to push it all the way up to the 30. Let's make sure everything gets fully seated. And then I'm going to back it back down because the side-by-side I think only asks for like 11 or 12 psi. It's pretty low, at least for these fronts. In the rear it's a little bit higher, but nothing significant. Well, there you guys go. That wasn't too terrible. There are some steps that are just tough to get through, especially if you've got kind of a stiff and cold tire like what I've got. But you know, with some of those tips and tricks in mind, and maybe thinking outside the box a little bit, you can make this work pretty easily. As I mentioned, you know, using a side-by-side or some other heavy machine that you can help press the tire, bring that tire down a little bit is good, especially with the stiff rubber. The ratchet strap method does work. It didn't really help so much in this instance, but with other wheels it has, so something to keep in mind as well. But anyways, I'm probably going to spend more time, even with the poor quality that these are, I'll spend more time editing the video and getting it on the YouTube than what this job took. I think it's probably only been half an hour or so, 45 minutes, even with this filming and such. So pretty manageable task, especially with a smaller tire like what's on these side-by-sides. If you guys are interested, there are other side-by-side videos out there. I'll put the playlist at the end of this video where, you know, we've done the engine rebuild. We've put the power steering on this unit. We did the vibration dampener, a couple other things. So check those out if you guys are interested. And as always, you know, it's free to give a thumbs up, free to drop a comment. If you guys have any questions or would like to see something similar to this, you know, just drop them below, let me know. I hope you guys all had a happy new year. And we look forward to seeing you on the next video. Take care.